What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Film Jump with Jesse and Chris. What's up, Chris?
Rumors of our demise have been greatly exaggerated. We're back.
yeah. Sorry about the hiatus, but we have a special guest with us today, our very best friend, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
It's going. Yeah. What are we talking about today?
Well, we've got Mike here because we're talking anime. These days, a lot of anime is better than what Hollywood is cranking out. And we're gonna create some converts here. We're gonna tell people what anime is great, why is anime great, and get people on board some of this stuff.
So, full disclosure, I'm not huge into anime, especially nowadays. I used to be, but I would say I'm a rather vanilla anime fan. Yeah. I've seen all of Dragon Ball Z, Super, love it, and I've kind of dipped my toes in some of the other anime, but I'm not really into it. Tell me why. Why is it better?
It's just the emotions hit so much more than what you get in some films nowadays, where the action's on point, the drama with it is on point, but really there's so many different types of anime that you could watch.
Like for me, back in the 90s, I was into Dragon Ball. I feel like a lot of people were into Dragon Ball. Pokemon started becoming very big, the card game, the anime. You had others, but I feel like back then it was super niche, taboo almost. Like you weren't cool back then. Yeah. Now it's cool. Why?
Yeah, and it was definitely one of those things where kids were getting into it, but it was one of those things where it was kids were into it and parents were like, I do not know why they're into all this Japanese stuff. You had Sailor Moon, Gundam Wing, Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon. It was becoming sort of normalized amongst kids, but then older kids and the cool kids or whatever, it was like a nerdy thing, and it was a parents don't understand it kind of a thing. But now we're generations removed from that, and so it's extremely mainstream. I've got a younger brother who he watches far more anime than he does any movies. He watches movies that I tell him to go see or that I take him to go see, but he binges more anime than I do. It's a completely kind of like generational shift.
You look at the box office now, anime films are making more and more and more as they come out. They're huge.
They're breaking records.
We could get into why Hollywood films aren't what they used to be. And don't get me wrong, you have movies that come out that are incredible, the past few years. We'll talk about those later. But for the most part, generally speaking, it's like this huge cultural shift now, I feel like, where anime is more widely accepted, it's more successful.
Yeah.
Everybody's wearing the t-shirts now, everybody's got the manga that they're reading.
Yeah.
But before, if you were, watching Naruto and you told somebody about it, you were a nerd.
Yeah, and that wasn't even, I skipped over that. After Dragon Ball Z really kind of ran its course, I was not on anime for years and years. So
I was the same way.
Yeah, Bleach, Naruto, all that stuff that was after Dragon Ball Z, wasn't on board with it. And I got back because of, weirdly enough, My Hero Academia. It was a year where a lot of Hollywood movies and franchises were kind of like ending or letting me down. Star Wars got crappy. Marvel was kind of running its course. Game of Thrones kind of didn't end in a fully satisfying way. I'm like, you're down in the dumps, and then people recommend something. They're like, oh, it's a great anime. It's superheroes. The animation's great. I watched 2 episodes of My Hero Academia, and I started to order the Blu-rays, and I got hooked, and it got me back in. It was like the new gateway drug to anime.
Yeah. Definitely a gateway.
You look back at Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, I think for at least the male audience, what made that so great was like you have these people who were essentially superheroes.
Yeah.
They're incredibly strong, they have powers, and every kid really wants to be that. And then you have episodes upon episodes where they're powering up and screaming, and it's like every kid my age, I feel like back then, secretly, when their parents weren't home, when they were alone, tried to turn into a Super Saiyan. I yelled, I did it, I'll admit it. I got told to do the dishes too many times. I'm going Super Saiyan.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah. Well, it's that power fantasy. In Japan they call it it's the shonen genre, which is like the young teen male kind of a genre, which is just action and superpowers and things like that. And it gets to be a superhero type of story without all of the normal tropes of superheroes, like Superman's hiding his secret identity from Lois Lane or something, and the same sort of things over and over again. It's just the mega fights and destruction and power-ups and special moves.
Yeah, and back then you had like 5 episodes to get prepared for just a fight. But nowadays, you get right into a fight in one episode, and then you're hooked sometimes.
Yeah, well, and I don't think anything can last forever or last a long time and become widespread among general audience if it's just the cool action fights. You have to have actual the chutzpah. Like you have to have something that people can latch onto. And I feel like nowadays, like the storytelling, it's a basic way to describe it, but I would say better.
Yeah.
And I think it's, you know, you look at the difference between American and Japanese culture, and from somebody who is a very vanilla anime fan, I think when I look at stuff from anime, it has almost like, dare I say, conservative or, you know,
a wholesome,
more wholesome vibe, so to speak. And we're not getting into certain types of anime that are out there, but generally speaking, it's like good guys versus bad guys, the right thing versus the wrong thing.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. The morality tale aspect of it is definitely appealing, because a lot of Hollywood stuff these days is very cynical, very kind of subversive, very kind of like no one's really all the way evil and stuff like that. And like, that's fine. There's a place for those kind of stories, but sometimes you want something that's played a bit more straight, you know, that not everything is subverting expectations, not everything is tearing down the heroes of the old generation to prop up the new heroes. It's like, it's just straightforward. Like, the icons are the icons, the heroes are the heroes, and they're going to defeat evil. And that's easy entertainment, but that there's a universal appeal to that. So I think that's part of it too.
So let's talk about what's the anime right now. What is everybody watching? If I want to show like my wife or somebody who's not into it, what do I get them to watch?
Well, there's so many different genres of anime you could get into. You got Studio Ghibli, that is fantastic with kids or even people that aren't into the crazy action stuff. That's fantastic. You have but mostly the shonen anime is what a lot of people like. It brings energy to the fights. It's very wild. One that would be really good right now, since they just came off of their latest season, was Demon Slayer, and they just had announced that they're going to do a trilogy of movies, which is unheard of for anime. Yeah. Like, nowadays we get anime in theaters. That's something that used to never happen.
I remember the Demon Slayer movie that came out not too long ago did massive numbers.
It's the biggest film in Japanese history and the biggest anime film in history, and yeah, it's an interesting thing. You know, our gateway drug was your sort of Dragon Ball Z, your Pokemon, maybe your Sailor Moon or your Gundam Wing.
Now, Yu Yu Hakusho, I remember that.
Yeah,
that
exactly. One. Nowadays, you know, if I would to try and recommend it to sort of the average sort of, everyone loves superhero movies, so it's easy to say, hey, watch My Hero Academia or One Punch Man. You know, it's like there's superheroes.
Those are two really good
and
ones
it's
to
anime,
get into.
And One Punch Man is kind of comedic.
Yeah.
So it's like an easy sort of entry. It's adjacent to something that's been very popular.
And as fans of Dragon Ball Z, if you know, there's always that thing, well, what about Goku for Saitama, who's One Punch Man? It's like, at first, if you've never seen the show, you're like, oh, nobody can beat Goku, but after you watch One Punch Man, oh man, it's like, okay, I get it.
The debate still rages.
Well, yeah. I would like to point out that Mike is just a guest on the show and does not represent the opinions of...
We're not going to listen to this anti-Goku slander. Is that what's going on?
He does not represent the official standing of the Film Jump.
Yeah. Jesse doesn't get to talk. He hasn't seen One Punch Man.
And then once you get into one of the...
I have.
Once you get into one of the easy and clear gateways, the big hot one right now has been mentioned. It's Demon Slayer. That's kind of the peak in terms of the animation quality, the visual storytelling. It's an easy plot. It's basically samurais who are fighting demons and decapitating them to achieve victory. Very good and evil.
It's like, yeah, we could talk about this is awesome, this is cool, but do we know why? Why is it seem like, you know, it's teetering in the other direction when you watch it?
All right.
So
I got two theories.
Go ahead.
All right. So two contributing things. I think one of it comes from very much the sort of generation of Netflix and chill, which is just stay home and stream something as like a date. And so when you've got anime streaming services now that are dedicated to anime instead of having to hunt for it, that becomes a very easy thing to watch. Yeah. Especially for that sort of teen crowd. You're sometimes just looking for something to kind of easily binge. And a lot of anime is simple enough that you can almost background noise it for some episodes. Like, your ears can perk up and you can pay attention to the important stuff, but you can kind of just let it ride. I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is I was thinking, you know, some people complain about movies. Older people complain that movies are are too dark and they have to turn on subtitles because they don't hear the dialogue clearly, and people are mumbling, and the performances are just everything's so naturalistic these days that some movies are just like, I see movies in theaters sometimes and I'm like, hard to make out what some of the dialogue is. One thing I will say about anime is that everything visually and in terms of the audio is very, very clear and very easy to understand, and very there's just a clarity to everything that is easy to appreciate and easy to understand, whether you're watching it subtitled or with English language dubbing, And I think there's an appeal to that. I think it's all visual art. Every single frame is drawn or animated, and so there's a thought process to it. It's not just filming random scenes and another close-up and another reverse shot. Every single frame and every single moment is sort of carefully planned out from an artistic perspective. So the visual engagement is just higher, I think.
That definitely makes sense to me. I've noticed the influence of anime kind of creep its way into everything that's like on Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, all these other things, and then
if it's not a comedy, they want to call it an anime,
right?
Because cartoons are considered comedic and not action oriented, so they don't call it an action cartoon. If Samurai Jack were made today, they would market and promote it as the new anime, Samurai Jack.
Right.
Yeah,
even though it's not really what it is.
But you have stuff like that kind of slowly comes into the meta culture of everything, and we kind of embrace it a little bit more. And now that the kids from that time, that era, are adults.
Yes.
Adults still do kid things. We still play video games. We still
whenever we get a chance.
Yeah, so it's like, I think that is another factor into it. And an obvious one also is the fact that I think people are just getting tired of the same movies over and over.
Hollywood is in a kind of a rut, there's great movies, but it's kind of, it's like any hobby or anything. You kind of eventually get burned out about it. Like, how many movies are you going to watch? Is your life just going to be going to the theater, watching movies, and it's kind of the same repetitive sort of, you've seen this horror movie, and it's very similar to 10 other horror movies you've seen. When people first get into anime, it's just this whole fresh perspective and different kind of thing. Eventually you'll see patterns and repetition in anime as well, but for a new audience and a new market, it's this whole sort of embarrassment of riches where you've got so many things to choose from.
Another thing is they're pretty short. You could get like 20 minutes for an episode, and that's easy to watch,
easily digestible.
And then that way you
very,
can. It's
very
like,
binge-worthy.
I could stay up 20 minutes and watch an episode of this, or even the movies. It's like they're only gonna be at max like an hour and a half long at most.
Yeah.
And it flows so well.
Yeah, and that's another thing. How often do you have to sit and pick out the time for a 2.5 hour movie? But hey, maybe I've got enough time to watch 1 or 2 episodes of an anime. That's only 40 minutes. That's less than an hour. It's just very flexible to binge it and marathon it. And in some regards, the more episodes there are, that's the more appealing it is to some people, because they're going to get a lot of mileage out of the series.
Yeah, sometimes you're like my wife and I now, sometimes we love the 90s style of anime. So we'll actually go back and look at what are some series that are completely finished. And we can be like, okay, well, we'll be able to watch this show for this whole month. And we don't have to worry about, what are we going to watch tonight? Or what's next,
We're waiting for the next season.
Yeah.
Right. I look at a lot of movies that have been like adaptations also. You have a lot of like Death Note and other films, whether successful or not, Hollywood sees the money in that. That's a business. And so they try to adapt it. And I think just over the course of the last 20 years or so, you've seen like a fundamental acceptance in other cultures and embracing of different views and topics, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I feel like, things like this are less taboo. Liking things that, for example, when I was young watching Dragon Ball Z, and some of the characters are standing there in shock and awe, and they have their mouth wide open, and they're like, I remember my dad looking at that and saying, like, what are you watching? What is this? It's super weird. But over time, it's
now my nephew, like, that's one of his favorite things to see in any anime is the moment where they're just like,
Yeah.
like it's just a trope. It's just a known thing. Like,
his power level's over 9,000.
Exactly.
Yeah. They just hit the floor in embarrassment or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and man, they take on very dramatic roles too, like Attack on Titan. I know the animation isn't for everybody, but it really hit to where you can see everybody's reasoning for why they're doing what they're doing.
Right. I was going to bring that up, in the fact that anime is just another, as Guillermo del Toro notoriously puts nowadays, it's just a medium.
Yes.
It's not
a genre.
It's not a genre. And when genre movies or films or cartoons and anime become successful, it paves the way, and now it is widely accepted, the fact that no, this isn't necessarily just a cartoon. This is a story. This has, real powerhouse performances or voice acting performances, I should say.
Yeah.
And the stories that are told can't be told in live action.
Yes, and some of them are wildly imaginative. The anime industry will sometimes seem to take a gamble on something that seems completely absurd. There is an anime that I've never watched that is called The Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. I have no idea what that anime is really about, but I know the title. It sounds absurd, but I think it's on its second or third season. So there's a market for it. So if it's like a comedy or an action comedy, I don't know, but it's a wild idea that would never get made in Hollywood, but it is now it's fairly successful. It's on its third season or something.
It's so funny how many animes there are where the title is a whole sentence.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, what's that show about? Oh, it's the title.
Yeah, there's like The Time I Became a Spider, or The Devil is a Part-Timer, which is like about like a demon who has to work at like a fast food restaurant or something. Like these wild concepts, and it's like, it sounds stupid, but then maybe you give it a try, and there are people that like live and die by some of these shows. They're like, oh my gosh, that's some of the funniest stuff I've ever seen. And it's stuff that Hollywood might be too afraid to take a gamble on or execute properly.
Yeah, you don't think there'd ever be a live action film from Hollywood called Chainsaw Man.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh, that was good too.
Exactly. They lean into the absurdity and they embrace it. And again, I like to say things like wildly imaginative. It's like, it's weird and might seem dumb, but then you watch it and it's like, well, this is actually really cool and really awesome, and it's playing by its own rules, and that can be fun,
Yeah.
Yeah, and even so, like some animes, like you can't think of trying to do a live action for it. Like, it seems like it'd be cool to do, but every time you think you see it get done, it doesn't exactly hit the same.
Yeah, looking at you, Dragon Ball Evolution.
Yeah, well, and I will say, Dragon Ball Evolution, the Cowboy Bebop series was absolutely horrible, but in defense, there are people that I know that have gotten into One Piece on the strength of the Netflix live action One Piece, that they've watched that and said, that is so good, I'm reading the manga or watching the anime, and I'll never be a One Piece guy because you tell me 1,100 episodes, I'm just never going to be that guy.
Yeah, that's true.
But, more power to One Piece for the live action working and getting people into the anime. I guess that's the whole, that's the whole idea. So there you go. It can be done.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to touch on stuff like the movies came out way back in the day. Your Akira or Akira, if you're, whatever,
Ghost in the Shell.
You have these films that are very influential, and Akira was by no means a small budget film. It had like the largest budget of any animation at that time.
That was a lot of work they did.
If you're convinced that anime is just this cartoons for kids thing, and you want to watch one movie that will change your opinion on that very quickly, watch Akira, and it will just change all of your preconceptions about what anime is or what anime can be. And someone said once, no Akira, you don't get The Matrix in 1999, and that's very true.
And Ghost in the Shell, it recently, a few years back, had the remake with
Scarlett
Johansson, great performance. Yeah. And is it a good movie? I think it is. It's a really good movie. I think it's very fun.
It's a cool movie,
but it's nowhere near as good as the anime.
As much as I love ScarJo, it does not hit the same way that
it's just
film
in
does.
The anime you can have a hit be more than just somebody getting punched. All of a sudden they get hit into a wall, and then the wall has a crevice, and then they just blow through it.
Yeah,
and it just hits so much better.
The visuals can just be much more over the top and imaginative, and they go into those inner monologues, but that adds all this tension and drama to it. It's this whole other style that can just enhance action or mystery or drama and just really push it over the edge. Well, and it comes in different forms too. There are a lot of Japanese video games that come over here and are super popular. How popular is Super Mario? How popular is Sonic? These are video games that are wildly popular in America and have the total kind of anime aesthetic, the big eyes, the bright colors, and But people wouldn't think of like, oh, Mario is some Japanese thing. It's just a video game. All the Nintendo video games, like that sort of tangential sort of anime style, Japanese style of entertainment, that over the top stuff, that imaginative stuff. That's because like there is an entire generation that has been raised on these things in more ways than one. So anime doesn't seem nearly as foreign or outlandish as it might have before, because the kind of culture and style of it has shown up in so many different things.
My wife never watched anime growing up. She was hanging out doing some stuff in the kitchen, and Chris was over, and we watched what was the movie?
It was Dragon Ball Z Cooler's Revenge,
Oh,
movie
yeah,
number 5.
Because
with
we
the
haven't
Disturbed on the soundtrack.
yeah, we haven't watched
Hashtag Falconer.
and we haven't watched anime in a long time, and as it ended, she was like, I think I could get into that. And so, that next night or next week or whatever, we started watching some Dragon Ball Z. And this is back when like it isn't as available as it is now, because I had to go online looking up for some ways to watch some of the old Dragon Ball Z. But I tell you what I did do is when I started showing her some of it is we started with Super and went backwards, just because the older style, it takes a while to get through some filler episodes or get through a fight, whereas the newer stuff is pretty quick through it. They're not waiting on chapters to finish in the manga.
That could also be a little bit of the TikTok brain, as they say nowadays. A little bit of ADHD.
Everybody's like,
yeah,
I don't have time for like half an episode of screaming.
Yeah, I do.
But,
I have all the time.
Hours later.
Cowboy Bebop.
Cowboy Bebop
Yeah,
is
exactly.
fantastic.
Well, and The Boy and the Heron just won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature.
The Boy and the Heron was good.
Over across the Spider-Verse, which is crazy.
I would say the most powerful way to convert someone is show them something where Goku transforms into Super Saiyan, and that's gonna turn someone into a fan.
Yeah.
First time you see something like that happen, you're like, oh wow, this is kind of neat.
Even having them watch Super Broly would be really good too.
Don't watch the Goku that is the terrible father who always leaves his son to the Uncle Piccolo and a terrible husband and Chi-Chi do everything. Yeah, so look, we could probably talk about this for hours and very specifics why anime is pretty much kicking Hollywood's butt. But you know what? I think it's okay. It's awesome. It's fun, and there's nothing wrong with that.
And if it causes Hollywood to step their game up a little bit, that's only a good thing. That's only a good thing. Learn a few lessons, You watch Man of Steel. If you've seen the final fight for Man of Steel, you've seen a Dragon Ball Z fight. Like this stuff isn't as foreign as you think it is, and isn't as weird and out there as you think it is.
Alrighty, well, I think that's going to pretty much wrap it up for this episode. Let us know in the comments below, what are you watching right now anime-wise? Do you prefer anime over your standard Hollywood movie? Mike, thanks for stopping by on the show as well. We greatly appreciate it. Hopefully you'll come back and do more episodes.
Hey, I totally will. Love you guys.
Cool. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for stopping by.
Have a good one.
Vegeta, now's your chance!